Beautiful Hodier African family, welcome to another edition of the African Liberation Media Show. I'm your co-host, Brother Amos, here with my esteemed elder, Baba Makaru. How you doing today, Baba Makaru?
Be before the good brother. Every day is a blessing. Every day is a blessing. Glad to be once again in the presence of our people. Another opportunity to discuss some issues that we think we give our unique perspective on.
I'll say, in light of recent events that have taken place in dealing with what's happening in Gaza and also with the ICJ's decision to call for an immediate halt with what the IDF and the Israelis are doing over there in Gaza, we decided to look in retrospect at the decision made by Judge Julius Sebutinde. As we discussed previously on this program, we disagree with her decision in the past to not go along with the genocide case or her disagreement with the genocide case presented by South Africa. Baba Makaru is calling Julius Sebutinde the Clarence Thomas of the ICJ. Brother, tell us what you mean by this.
Be before the brother. Well, Clarence Thomas, in my opinion, is a person who makes rulings on the Supreme Court of the United States that, in my opinion, are detached from the reality of the lives and the world that most people of African descent in the United States are experiencing. And Sebutinde's rulings on these cases that have been brought before the International Court of Justice by South Africa against the Zionist state Israel are also, in my opinion, detached from reality. And so what we've done is gone through some of those rulings, and just to buttress the points that we are making, we put up this form here so that we can go through and people can see for themselves exactly what we are saying in terms of these two justices, the judges of African descent, Julius Sebutinde of Uganda and Clarence Thomas of Pinpoint, Georgia. So what has happened is that as now the genocidal war in Gaza, which is now in its 8th month, as it has been processed, by the Zionist state following the attacks that were launched by the Hamas organization and some of its allies into quote unquote Israel proper on October 7th, has resulted in such a barbaric response that quite frankly could hardly be called a military offensive based on the way it has been conducted. And so there have been several rulings by the International Court of Justice, since South Africa first filed its charges against the Zionist state based on the UN Convention of 1948. Initial charges were filed in December 2023, and the court made its first ruling in January 26, 2024. But what I wanted to do was, because the focus is on this judge, Julius Sebutinde, just wanted to look at how she's ruled on certain cases. Now, we also know that in the same time frame, the International Criminal Court on May the 20th issued a request for some warrants, 5 warrants, 2 against Zionists, the Prime Minister of the Zionist state, Benjamin Netanyahu, and their defenseman, Gallant, and 3 leaders of the Hamas organization. That's a separate issue, although they are connected in terms of, in my opinion, both rulings, both decisions, the International Criminal Court decision on May the 5th and the ICJ decision ruling on May 24th. Both of them, in my opinion, are an attack on the narrative of the Zionist state. But for right now, we just want to focus on the ICJ ruling. And in terms of this Judge Sebutinde, I wanted to go back and look at a ruling by the ICJ on March 16th, 2022. This was allegations of genocide under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Ukraine versus the Russian Federation. So this was filed on, I think it was sometime after the war started or escalated from the situation that had been going on since 2014, started in February of 2022, and the ICJ handed this ruling down on March 16th. And the vote was 13 justices to 2. And the ruling said that the Russian Federation shall immediately suspend military operations that it commenced on the 24th of February, 2022 in the territory of Ukraine. So basically, this ruling is ordering the Russian Federation to cease fire, to halt its military operations in Ukraine. That's basically what it's saying. Immediately suspend the military operation that it's commenced. Among the 13 judges who voted in favor of asking for a ceasefire, asking Russia to immediately suspend its military operations, was none other than the Ugandan Judge Sebutinde. And I just wanted to cover that just for the historical perspective, because we want to contrast that to the rulings that were subsequently made and how she subsequently voted. Okay, so on January 26th, the same convention had a case, the case of South Africa versus Israel, and I don't want to go through all of these rulings because basically most people that have followed this already know how this worked. But just for example, in the 6 rulings that the court handed down, the first ruling was 15 votes to 2, and basically said Israel should stop killing members of the Palestinian group, stop causing serious bodily harm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a 15 to 2 vote. The 2 who voted against this provisional measure were none other than the Ugandan Sebutinde and the Zionist Judge Barak. And we just go on down through there, all of the rest of 15 to 2 on the second provisional measure, 16 to 1. 16 to 1. Now, the Zionist judge actually voted for this. The state of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. The only person who voted against that, the only judge that voted against that, was none other than Julius Sebutinde. 16 to 1. Ruling number 4, once again, 16 to 1. The one person who voted against it, once again, Julius Sebutinde. In ruling 5, we have gone up, brother. Fifth rulings of the provisional measures 5 and 6. Once again, the votes were 15 to 2. The 2 votes against these particular rulings, like state of Israel shall take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence. The two judges who voted against Provision 5 and Provision 6 were none other than Sebutinde, once again, and the Zionist judge.
Let me jump in here for a second because this is unbelievable. So here you have a measure where they're asking Israel to take effective measures to prevent destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
What judge would not want anyone participating in war to do that? that means it seriously sounds like to me that any measure that was at any way against Israel, she was going to vote against because this doesn't make any sense. It's one thing to vote and say that you don't believe that genocide is being committed. It's another thing to try to block measures to prevent genocide. Go ahead, brother.
But I mean, well, I mean, this is why I compared her to Clarence Thomas. I'm saying that I don't know what the thought process is here. Uh, her, she started off by saying that South Africa really didn't have a case uh, of genocide against Israel because they haven't proven that the Zionists were intending to commit genocide. You got this whole thing of intent, which is a major problem, in my opinion, in the court of in any court of justice. Right here in the United States, for example, um, when 12-year-old Tamir Rice was killed by a police officer in Cleveland, Ohio, the Obama administration failed to prosecute the officer Timothy Loman after he was acquitted. They refused to bring charges against him in Cleveland. The prosecutor did, but the Obama administration could have filed civil rights charges against Loman. But the Obama Justice Department, and I can't remember if it was Holder that at that time or forgot the lady that followed him, but they said they couldn't prove intent. But these measures, the January 26 measures, weren't about proving intent. South Africa didn't have to prove intent. They were simply asking, is it plausible or is it possible that this is taking place? And the court agreed that it was plausible that genocide is taking place. That the intent part of this is not part of that, not part of this ruling. That will be decided at a later point. They wanted these provisional measures to try to put something in place to stop what was happening in January, and the court made these 6 rulings, and
But
she
right
voted
above,
against every one of them.
so 16-1, number 4 here,
Mm-hmm.
it says, shall take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So this is just them telling Israel, hey, allow humanitarian aid to come in. And
Right.
she voted against that. Wow.
Yeah, she said that they were allowing humanitarian aid to come in, that they weren't blocking aid, but the organization that this court works for, the United Nations, had numerous reports in the field by their workers, some of whom have been killed, indicating that Israel was in fact engaged in a process of denying humanitarian aid and food, which is part of the ruling of the ICC prosecutor of deliberate starvation.
And you see, that's where what most people don't realize, that's where the real genocide takes place. Because you could count 35,000, 45,000 deaths by bombs, by guns, but it's the starvation of the millions of people that's going to die that won't be counted because it won't be quote unquote done directly by Israel, but indirectly, if you're blocking humanitarian aid, is no different than what happened to the Russians in the Bolshevik Revolution, when 60 million Russians died due to starvation.
Yeah, and
You have a manufactured food crisis.
it boggles the mind how in the face of all of the evidence, all of the reports by independent, and we have some links that we'll get to, by from organizations like Reuters and the Associated Press. You can't accuse these people of being pro-Palestinian, not Reuters, pro-Palestinian. Come on. And so you may not want to believe Al Jazeera, or you may not even if you work for the UN, you may not want to believe the United Nations, but you have independent reports that are saying that Israel was blocking the ability of humanitarian aid to get into the Gaza Strip. And she said, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. So let's go down to the March 28th ruling. And here she must have had a Freudian slip, or maybe a brain fade or something on one of these rulings. So on March 28th, so South Africa, so the ICJ made these rulings in January, and they had no power to enforce the rulings because the rulings, the enforcement body for the United Nations is the Security Council. And the United States vetoed every ceasefire resolution except for one, and one they abstained on, and that was in the face of massive protests on college campuses, and Biden looking at his plummeting poll numbers, particularly among young voters. But so Israel, even though it's a member of the United Nations and is required to respond, didn't respond. They wrote something on paper which wasn't worth a hill of beans, but they never responded to the actual measures that says you must stop doing this. And so South Africa keeps coming back to the court saying we need more measures. And it's like, trying to put, straws on a camel's back. You keep piling up the straws, and sooner or later the camel collapses. And that's the strategy that's being undertaken by Dr. Naledi Pandor and the government of South Africa. So they went back to the court March 28th by 14-2. The court reaffirms the provisional measures indicated in its order of January 26th. So they said, first of all, let's establish the precedent. What we ordered on January 26th still stands. We stand by this. And of course, since Sebutinde voted against it in January, she voted against it again, along with the Zionist judge, 14-2. Now, 15-1. I don't know what happened to her on this one. The state of Israel shall ensure with immediate effect that its military does not commit acts which contribute to a violation of any of the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza as a protected group. For some reason, she voted for that. I don't know what. That was an aberration. I guess the best way to describe, what happened there. I don't know what her thought processes were on that. But anyway, they reaffirmed it, and what Israel, as they processed, they went through this process. I don't like the term ethnic cleansing. I just think that that just is not an adequate description of what's going on. I mean, but that's the term that a lot of people like Dr. John Mersheimer and others use. But Israel was processing the war to drive the Palestinians out of Gaza. They want to remove all of the Palestinians out of Gaza. Okay, that is their objective. So they started in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and then they constantly pushed the Palestinians south, into Khan Yunis and these other places, and finally over 1 million people wound up in the area of Rafah. And so as South Africa saw this taking place, they said, look, we need to go back to the court again and see if we can get another ruling, right? Because basically the objective is to just keep landing one legal blow after another, hoping that at some point some of these countries in the world will say, look, we have got to isolate this state. We've got to isolate a state that has such total disregard for human life. And so on May 24th, the court by 13-2 ruled that the state of Israel shall immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah government, which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction, whole or in part. 13-2. The two votes against, once again, Julius Sebutinde and the Zionist judge. Okay. And then the second part of that was to maintain the Rafah crossing. There's a crossing there. They call it the Philadelphia crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip, and the Zionists decided that they were going to close the crossing, which was one of the major entry points for humanitarian aid. Trucks coming out of Egypt, into Rafah to deliver aid. The Zionists decided to close it. So the court is saying that they should make sure it's open. And then the other ruling, the third ruling there was on a fact-finding mission regarding investigations of genocide. Go ahead, brother. And then the state of Israel shall submit a report. So she voted against all of those. She voted against all of those measures. And so what we're waiting for now in terms of this latest ruling is for one of the members of the Security Council to bring these orders up for vote, to force the United States, perhaps the United Kingdom or whoever, but the United States for sure, right? Joe Biden will surely order his ambassador, Linda Thomas Greenfield, imperialism in blackface, to veto a resolution that would make these provisions effective. So Sebutinde issued a 28-page dissenting opinion, trying to explain or rationalize why she voted against the latest round of provisional measures that the majority of the justices voted on. And we should stop here and just for the record, the American judge, and there have been two American judges during the process of these rulings, on Israel versus South Africa, or South Africa versus Israel. The American judge, even the American judge, has voted for every ruling. Even the American judge, clearly going against the prevailing narrative of the Biden administration and the United States Congress, and some other people here in the United States, the Christian Zionists and others. So Sebutinde said, and so I just picked out, I think, 7 points maybe. She said, I voted against the order because I firmly believe that the provisional measures previously indicated and reaffirmed by the court adequately address the current situation in the Gaza Strip, including Rafah. Now, this is absurd. She said that she believed the provisional measures previously indicated and reaffirmed adequately addressed the current situation. She voted against all of those measures, except for one. But then she said she believes the measures are effective. How can you say something that you don't believe was correct was effective?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the thought process here, Brother Amos? I mean, help me out a little bit, brother.
It's what you call asinine. It's what you call asinine. You're saying that we don't need to address those situations any further because the previous measures handled that situation. But you were the person that was trying to prevent those measures from being implemented. It's asinine. So essentially, she's admitting herself that she was wrong.
I don't know how you. I don't know how. I don't know what thought process you can use. I mean, is this like dissociative identity disorder? I mean, I don't know what it is. So she goes on to try to rationalize her decisions. So these are just some of the things she said. Ordering Israel to halt its military offensive in Rafah is susceptible to ambiguity and could be misunderstood or misconstrued as ordering an indefinite and unilateral ceasefire. So she says that
And
if
she released this statement before the uh the recent incident in Rafah, which took place the other day. So
yeah
this was last Friday when she released this, and then right after she released this, they go and bomb a tent community.
a camp, yeah, right, and kill several people. But what she's saying is that if you order Israel to halt its military offensive, people will consider that to be a unilateral ceasefire. Well, why not? Okay, so basically, the rest of this is basically, propaganda that could come straight out of the Knesset or out of Netanyahu's war cabinet. She said, I firmly believe that Israel has the right to defend itself against its enemies, including Hamas, and to continue to rescue its missing hostages. They have not processed a war to try to rescue anybody. That is not what they have been trying to do. What they are trying to do is drive all of the Palestinians out of Gaza and kill as many Palestinians as possible. They are not taking the fight directly to Hamas because they're not going where Hamas is. Okay? She says Hamas continues to launch. Everything that she wrote here is just a rationalization of what the Zionist state is doing. And number 4, she says, Hamas continues to launch attacks from Gaza, including Rafah, and still holds over 100 Israeli hostages. According to Israel, more than 10,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel since the hostilities began, including over 1,000 recently from Rafah. Even from the vicinity of Rafah, of the Rafah crossing, a rocket launched from Rafah recently landed in a children's playground. How many children have been killed in Gaza?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I know you said you posted, I believe 7 or so of these explanations. In any of her explanations, did she even mention any of the numbers of Palestinian women and children that have been killed?
I don't know. I don't think she mentioned any of the numbers. She did, I think, in her last statement, mention something about that some Palestinians have suffered losses as a result of this. I don't know if I included that or not. But the reason why I added this statement here is that she's concerned about one rocket that landed in a children's playground when you could easily have 20,000 children killed in Gaza. I mean, the numbers now just don't even add up. The number of people buried under rubble, the people the rubble that Israel has run over with bulldozers. I mean, she says the responsibility of the suffering Palestinians of Gaza does not lie only with Israel, nor is it correct to say that Israel has failed to act to alleviate the suffering. This is detached from reality. Nor is it correct to say that Israel has failed to act to alleviate that suffering. I mean, what?
And when you
Go
honestly,
ahead.
when you shut out when the government bans media outlets and doesn't allow investigators to come in, how does she even know that the information that she's presenting is accurate? Because who's providing her with the information other than Israeli sources?
Talking points straight out of the IDF or either uh, Biden, Netanyahu, same thing. The War Council. However, the evidence actually shows now this is appalling. The evidence actually shows a gradual improvement in the humanitarian condition in Gaza since the court's order. Furthermore, multiple concrete actions were taken by Israel to facilitate the provision of humanitarian aid for the civilian population of Gaza since the March order of the court. We got some things down there that are going to refute this, and I just finally, Israel has, throughout the conflict, warned Palestinians in Gaza of upcoming operations and has repeatedly requested evacuation of the civilians from areas of active fighting. And we've had report after report after report that said the people of Gaza move into an area where Israel told them to move to, and then that area is bombed. That area is bombed. And so, I mean, we just pulled some of the headlines here from Al Jazeera, which has actually been banned by Israel, but they're still getting reports. Israel bombs yet another Gaza camp that it had declared a safe zone. This is what you were referring to, because this happened on the 27th, and they actually have photos, from that bombing of the camp where they told people, go over here and you'll be safe. But they have said that time and time and time and time again. I mean, it's just like, the genocide that took place against the indigenous people. All of these people are just liars. They're liars and fathers and mothers of lies. They're the people written about in John 8:44. Another counter to Sebutinde's disoriented, disjointed, detached from reality, dissenting opinion, details of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. This comes from Reuters. The Gaza Strip is suffering and unfolding. I think this was it might have been on May the 1st. The Gaza Strip is suffering an unfolding humanitarian catastrophe nearly 7 months since Israel launched a devastating offensive. Okay. So that's from Reuters. Okay. We have another report. I think this might be from the AP. What are the latest obstacles to bringing humanitarian aid into Gaza, where hunger is worsening? The head of the UN Food Agency said northern Gaza is already experiencing a full-blown famine. What is she reading? I mean, if it doesn't come from the current reincarnation of Joseph Goebbels in the Zionist government, what is she reading? And is there anything else on this, brother? I can't remember. So that report was from AP, and it was also a report in May, but this one goes back to I think a lot of people will remember this because it goes back to February. This came from CNN. Israeli forces fired on a food convoy in Gaza. UN documents and satellite analysis reveals. So these were trucks that were bringing food. This is before they had closed some of these crossings that are now closed. They were bringing food. They targeted the trucks. They said that there was a Hamas commander or somebody from Hamas in the trucks, and bombed the trucks that were bringing food. Now this was in February. Surely, I mean, this information is out there for the whole world to see, but here you are making statements that they've done everything to improve the situation.
They've escalated the situation. I mean, you've had over 200 humanitarian aid workers that have been killed. You had the situation with the World Food Kitchen workers that were killed. Then you had the situation where the UN worker from India, I believe, was killed in a marked vehicle. You had the
Mm-hmm.
situation where the aid trucks were taken over and taken hostage by Israeli citizens
Mm-hmm.
who then destroyed the supplies that were on that truck.
Right.
You've had the situation where an Egyptian military member was killed near the border of Rafah in Egypt by the IDF.
Yeah.
So the situation has not improved. The situation has gotten worse. And she didn't mention any of those things that I just mentioned, but yet you mentioned a rocket going to a playground from Rafah. Uh, and yet we have direct, clear evidence that the IDF is killing and preventing aid workers from bringing in food and humanitarian resources, which is why the United States had to build a pier that would allow food to come in an area that they could not block or even airdrop food. So if the humanitarian crisis has been improved, it wasn't because Israel woke up and said we're gonna improve the situation. It was because the United States is trying to cover their ass in playing both sides of the fence
Mm-hmm.
and funding the Israelis to kill and also trying to provide humanitarian aid at the same time.
Exactly.
And that's just nothing but a prevention of being convicted of any war crimes to try to look like you are um, trying to stop what's happening.
Yes.
That's the only reason I believe that Biden and his administration are doing anything. For one, is to appeal to more voters in the United States, and for two, to have some separation between themselves and Netanyahu, who I
Mm.
believe that if it all boils down to it, they'll throw him under the bus.
Hmm. Absolutely. But we just wanted to bring, this latest ruling, the latest votes by Judge Julia Sebutinde of Uganda, who's actually got promoted uh, in January to be the vice president of the ICJ. I don't know what the people were thinking who did that, but nevertheless, um, what we see from her, uh, are clearly, Clarence Thomas like rulings, but the only thing is that the major difference, of course, here is that what you have a genocidal war taking place, and we don't see the world standing up despite all the rulings of the ICJ and all of these Security Council and UN General Assembly, resolutions. We don't see the world standing up to take any real measures to stop this. And we have a judge of African descent actually rationalizing the actions of people committing genocide. And this is, this has to go down in the category of people who have betrayed not only the African race but humanity in terms of the mindset that simply rationalizes or tolerates or even supports the actions of the people committing genocide.
Right. And I think the perfect term that was created for a race traitor, at least for African people, is Mabutu. We call them Mabutus. I don't know if it would apply to Sebutinde because essentially she's not um, making this judgment against African people at this time. But I just simply believe that she took a paycheck. Like I said before, I believe that the motivation is money, and if it wasn't a direct check, we see the result was, like you said, a promotion.
Hmm.
And you pointed out the direct hypocrisy. And if her ruling was consistent in the Ukraine case,
Hmm.
then I would be more inclined to believe then this is just her dissension and how she believes her judgment on these cases. It is similar, which is often what you'll see with a lot of judges, but it is complete hypocrisy because it's two cases where you have on one end far more evidence that you would think a judge would be able to look at and apply and say, okay, we should be in favor of a ceasefire, versus another situation where there was not the same amount of casualties of civilians, women, and children, but you vote for a ceasefire in that situation. It just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, the situation in Ukraine, however you feel about it, the situation between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, which actually has been people, this Eurocentric fragmented thinking, they want to start things where they want to start it as if nothing took place before. This goes back to the actions of Joe Biden, Victoria Nuland, Barack Obama, and others uh, regarding the coup in Ukraine in 2014 and the subsequent war against the Russian-speaking people in the breakaway Donbass area of Ukraine. So the war has been going on since 2014. Uh, Putin put forth every effort possible to he begged Biden to have a meeting with him to discuss a resolution to the problem in December of 2021, and Biden has totally ignored him because the military-industrial complex says we want war, and the arrogance that Dr. King talked about, I can hear God saying to America, "You too arrogant." They thought for some reason that they would be able to bring down the Russian Federation, particularly the government of Vladimir Putin. And so the result, though, has been a war between two countries. And the overwhelming majority of the deaths in that war have been by people on a battlefield, by people on a battlefield, not people in their apartments getting hit with 2,000-pound bombs, not people in universities. Every university in Gaza has been destroyed, not people in hospitals, which have been leveled. Okay. You have a situation there that is not a war between armies. It's certainly not a war between countries, but it's not even a war between armies. It's the wholesale killing of civilians. And this person looks at one situation and says, yes, I'm in favor. We're ordering a ceasefire in March of 2022. Now, the interesting thing about it is that in March of 2022, Russia and Ukraine had agreed to a ceasefire. And Biden told Boris Johnson to get on a plane and get over to Kyiv and tell Zelensky, no, pull out of that ceasefire agreement. We're going to defeat these guys on the battle. We're going to defeat the Russians on the battlefield. But they had already worked out the details to actually stop the war in Ukraine, but they didn't. But nevertheless, what what has taken place since then is that they call for the International Court of Justice called for a ceasefire. A ceasefire has not taken place, but Sebutinde was in favor of a ceasefire in a war between two countries. She's opposed to a ceasefire in a war against Palestinian civilians. That's the hypocrisy. And it's, to me, it's this almost unprecedented level of hypocrisy, from any judge or justice, in my opinion. I mean, you know, when when Tawny ruled in the Dred Scott decision, he wasn't being hypocritical. He was being true to his white supremacist self, slave owning white supremacist self. What this lady claims to believe, I don't know, but just in the face of the reality on the ground, what she's ruling versus the reality on the ground, like you said, brother, is asinine.
But brothers and sisters, leave your comments down in the comment section. Give this video a like and subscribe. And until next time, a beep for Hodier.
Be before the brothers and sisters.